Hey everybody, welcome back to the video on my Storytime channel. So I'm going to continue reading the second book left on the kids series, Second Chance. Yeah, I'm going to continue reading the series. I find the series entertaining and exciting, like I said before. It's, an incredible series, even if you don't believe with the stuff that, the spiritual aspects of the series, you can find it entertaining, You can still find the series, like, entertaining, like, the action in the series truly can keep you riveted, But that's just what I personally think anyway. But yeah, let me continue reading. Chapter 3, Lionel's Shock. Lionel Washington had sprinted down the street away from New Village Church, looking both ways for any sign of Ryan Daly. He knew the little guy had gotten quite a head start on him, and only hoped that Ryan was not still running. If he was, Lionel would never catch him. Lionel was a fast runner, but this was ridiculous. He huffed and puffed and sucked air, running in the general direction of his own house. He hoped Ryan's home was somewhere on the way. Maybe the kid has to stop and catch his breath himself. Lionel slowed to a walk, put his hands on his hips, allowing his chest to expand as long as to drink in more air. He squinted at the small form huddled under a street lamp two blocks ahead. It could have been anybody, of course, as people just like him. People had lost loved ones and were scared of death and wondering what was going to happen, wandered about hoping to see someone they knew. When Lionel was within a block of the streetlight, the form rose and began to walk. It was Ryan Daly. Unfortunately, he was not running. At least not until he turned and looked behind him. When he saw Lionel and began to jog. Hey, kid, Lionel called. For a moment, he forgotten the boy's name. Wait up. At first, Ryan seemed to speed up, but then he appeared that he had resigned himself to the fact that there was nowhere to go anyway. He stepped off the sidewalk into the grass and thrust his hands deep in his pockets, his chin tucked to his chest. Lionel feared he had been crying. Maybe he still was. He sure didn't have to be ashamed of that, Lionel thought. Lionel hurried to the boy and stood next to him, mashing his poster, pushing his hands into his pockets and looking down. What are you going to do? Lionel said. In his peripheral vision, Lionel saw Ryan shrug. Ryan, isn't it? Lionel said, that's your name, right? Lionel looked up in time to see Ryan nod slightly. Ryan, I know how you feel. This is terrible, and we all hate it. How could you know how I feel? Ryan blurted. Your family is in heaven. For all I know, my parents aren't just dead, they're in hell. Lionel didn't know what to say. He believed that was true. Nothing is going to make that any better. The important thing is now is he's finally managed. What are you going to do? Ryan sat in the grass in the darkness and put his face between his knees. Though his voice was muffled, Lionel could make out what he was saying. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm not going to be able to stand being in the house all by myself. I know that. I thought maybe just gather a bunch of my stuff, pitch my tent in the backyard. I guess I could stand going in there for food in the bathroom, but I wouldn't want to live in there. I sure wouldn't want to sleep in there. Me either, Lionel said. My house is my family's clothes all over the place, right where they left them when they disappeared. I wish mine did, Ryan said. They wouldn't have to believe this stuff about everybody who disappeared going to heaven. Lionel nodded but said nothing. I don't suppose you want to help me get my tent set up? Sure I would, Lionel said. I've got nothing else to do. It's just a couple of blocks from here, Ryan said. Thanks, Lyle. It's Lionel. Sorry, like the train? Uh-huh. A few minutes later, Lionel and Ryan were digging around the garage of Ryan's house. Lionel saw Ryan occasionally looking at the door that led into the kitchen. You want something in there? Lionel said. I'll get it for you. I am getting a little hungry, Ryan said. It's just I don't want to go in there yet. I'll get you whatever you want, Lionel said. You can want me to just find whatever I can in the refrigerator and the cupboards. The Daly's kitchen was similar to Lionel's own. He could hear Ryan dragging stuff from the garage to the backyard, and he hoped that the boy would invite him to stay. Lionel would have to go home and get some of his stuff, but he didn't want to be in his house any more than Ryan wanted to be in this one. Lionel found a bunch of snacks and soft drinks and went directly into the backyard from the kitchen. He wondered if Ryan would be too shy to invite him. You want some company tonight? Lionel offered. You'd stay with me? Sure. I don't want to be alone tonight any more than you do. Once the tent was set up, the snacks, flashlights, and all, the boys headed towards Lionel's house just over a mile away. Ryan wasn't saying much. Lionel had never been a big talker either. When he wasn't talking, he felt like crying. He assumed Ryan felt the same. I guess I don't have to worry about going to school tomorrow, Lionel said. Yeah, I heard in the news that enough students and teachers and parents disappear there might be a long time before school opens again. Lionel snorted, so we'd be thankful for a little good news in all this mess. That wasn't really funny, of course. This was a nightmare from which neither of them would awaken. Lionel figured Ryan was just as tired as he was by the time he reached Lionel's house. You want to come in for a minute so while I get my stuff? It beats being outside alone, I guess. The first thing Lionel noticed in the kitchen was that the answering machine was emitting a steady tone that indicated the tape was completely full of messages. Ryan followed him upstairs. Lionel ignored his parents and his sister's bedrooms and grabbed a backpack that he stuffed with clothes. On the way down, he turned to the kitchen, listened to the messages, noticing that Ryan was no longer behind him. Lionel turned to see Ryan staring at Lionel's father's nightclothes draped over the chair in the living room. Come on, man, Lionel said. That gives me the creeps just as much as it does you. White people were nothing new to Lionel, of course, and it wasn't surprised that the blonde boy was paler than most. But he had never seen a face as ghost-like as Ryan's when he turned away from those empty clothes in the living room. Ryan appeared to be gasping for breath. Lionel wanted to get Ryan's mind off of what he had just seen. "Let me listen to those messages," he said, "and then we'll go." Lionel played the answering machine for several minutes, taped for several minutes, before getting past the messages he had already heard that morning. He had already heard that morning. He was suddenly to hear that the entire rest of the tape was just one long, rambling message from none other than his Uncle Andre. As soon as Lionel began listening to it, he wished he hadn't turned it on. He wished even more that Ryan was not there to hear it. He was clear Uncle Andre was either drunk or high or both. His grief and his horror were obvious. "Lionel, man," he said, "I done you wrong. Led you down the wrong path, boy. I just called to tell you I'm sorry and to say goodbye. I never meant to do wrong by you. I hope you find yourself to forgive me someday. I should have been there for you, and I should stay here and be there for you now, but I just can't. I can't live with myself." Lionel never heard anything like that before, but it sounded like Andre was planning to kill himself. Lionel listened with urgency, hoping and praying that we would hear some clue about where Andre was calling from. A couple of times Lionel thought he heard voices in the background and wondered if Andre's enemies, the ones he owed money to, had put him up to this. Maybe they wanted to sound like he was planning suicide when they actually were going to kill him. Lionel didn't want his imagination to run away with itself. This is bad enough. Andre was serious. Dead serious. Lionel glanced at Ryan, who still appeared ashen and seemed to be barely breathing. Lionel turned the machine off. "Maybe you don't want to hear this," he said. "No, it's all right. You better find out where he's calling from, or we'll never be able to get open. I'm not going to drag you into this. This guy is my uncle. I need to handle it myself. Don't keep me out of this," Ryan said. "I got to keep myself busy, or I'll be thinking about the same thing your uncle is thinking about." Let's hope he's still just thinking about it. Lionel turned the machine on again and could hear what sounded like a bottle being poured into a glass. Also, we had to guess he would have to assume that Andre was downing some pills. Andre's voice became slower and more slowly. He cried more as he spoke. "Lionel, don't make the same mistakes I made. I was wrong, totally wrong. I heard all my life that God loved me, that Jesus died for me, that I was a sinner. I knew it. I believed it. I just never bought into it for myself. I told you a lot of it was fairy tales, and I hoped I was right, but I was wrong. I was wrong." Lionel didn't think any more tears to shed, but he could feel them welling up again. Andre sounded so lost, so empty. Lionel thought about whom he could call, where he could possibly find Andre. He wondered if anyone left behind at the church might have any idea where Andre was. He put out the machine and dialed the church. The line was busy. He tried time and time again, but it was busy. He asked Ryan to take over and keep dialing. Meanwhile, he listened to the rest of the tape. Which went on for more than 20 minutes. In it, his Uncle Andre simply repeated how sorry he was, how sick he was of himself, how much he hated his life, and what a waste it had been. In the end, he resorted to simply apologizing over and over and saying goodbye. He was still talking, mumbling, rambling when the tape ran out. Ryan said, "It's ringing." Lionel grabbed the phone. When the machine at the church picked it up, however, it merely signaled a long tone as well. The tape was full, no one was there to answer either. "I've got to get to Andre's place," Lionel said. "Where's that?" "In Chicago." Ryan said. "In Chicago." "How are you going to get there?" "On my bike, I guess," Lionel said. "You want to go with me?" "Sure. I've never ridden a bike to Chicago. You can use my sister's bike," Lionel said. "No, I've got my own. Just give me a ride back to my house and I'll get mine." Half an hour later, Lionel and Ryan were pedaling quickly out of Mount Prospect, heading toward Chicago. Lionel hoped that he would recognize the same landmarks he did while riding in the car. It seemed to take us so long to get to each one while riding bikes. He soon realized he was going too fast to keep up his endurance. "Let's slow down," he hollered. "Let's save our strength. It's going to be a long trip." The boys reached Andre's neighborhood around 11 o'clock. Lionel had never been out that late alone before, and he was a retreat that no one else seemed to mind. He couldn't imagine riding his bike through the cordoned-off expressways and side streets on his way to the inner city of Chicago without being stopped by the police. It simply seemed too strange that two young boys would be out on their bikes in Chicago at this time of night. Had it not been for his grief and his fear and his anxiety over Uncle Andre, Lionel might have enjoyed an adventure like this. But just then he couldn't imagine ever enjoying anything again. I'm sure Bruce Barnes is right that he was so eligible to become a Christian, even at this late date. It was awful that he missed the truth the first time around, especially when he knew better. You sure didn't want to live through a period like this and lose out in heaven altogether. "How do your legs feel?" Lionel asked Ryan. "Tight and heavy?" "Yeah," Ryan said. I can't imagine riding all the way back to Mount Prospect tonight." "But we have to," Lionel said. "The only people I would want to stay with down here are all gone. I wouldn't feel safe with the ones who are left." When Lionel and Ryan came within sight of the tacky little hotel where Andre rented the room, a couple of policemen were grading back to their cruiser. The one getting in the passenger side noticed the boys. "No time to even deal with you two tonight," he said. "Why don't you just run along home?" "I'm looking for someone," Lionel said. "Who isn't?" The cop said. "My uncle lives in this building," Lionel said. He gave the officer Andre's full name. The cops glanced at each other with what Lionel's sense was a knowing look. "Should I tell him?" one cop said to the other. The driver shrugged. "Why not?" "Son, your uncle is the reason we were called off traffic duty where we've been all day. He was found in his apartment a couple of hours ago. His body was just loaded onto an ambulance, taken onto one of the morgues set up at a high school about 7 blocks down the street here." "A morgue?" Lionel said, his voice tight. "Yeah, sorry. How did he die?" "I'm not at liberty to tell you that, son. You can take it up with the people at the morgue. I'm real sorry, but we gotta go. Your boy should be getting back home now. You've got somebody to go to? Somebody to go to? We'll be alright, Lionel said, but he wasn't alright, and I knew Ryan wasn't either. Lionel realized that he and Ryan finally had something in common. Now they both had people they loved who were dead and gone, and not to heaven. Lionel thought he should identify his uncle's body, but he didn't want to see his Andre that way. He really didn't want to know how Andre killed himself either, if that was really the way he died. What difference did it make whether he killed himself or was murdered? He was gone. There was no more hope for him, and Lionel had one more reason to grieve. Lionel and Ryan rode back to Ryan's house in silence. The trip home took even longer than the trip to Chicago. Ryan seemed as starved as Lionel felt, and they stuffed crackers in their mouths and washed them down with soft drinks before stretching out in the tent. It was well for midnight by now, and Lionel heard Ryan whimpering in the dark. He was crying himself to sleep, and Lionel did the same. So yeah, that's chapter 3 of the second book Left Behind the Kids series, Second Chance. The chapter 3, Lionel Shock. Yeah, that was the third chapter. And take care, everybody. Another video from my Storytime channel. Take care, everybody.